Let's break down the real impact of the Trump-era tariffs by looking at the numbers. Over the course of several years, these tariffs cost American importers more than $230 billion. This wasn't just a distant policy decision, it was a direct tax that landed squarely on the shoulders of U.S. businesses and ultimately, American consumers. Every time a company paid more to bring in goods, those costs rippled through the economy, affecting prices on everything from electronics to everyday household items. Nearly all of these increased costs were passed down the supply chain, as confirmed by a 2023 Peterson Institute study. This meant that not only importers but also wholesalers, retailers, and finally everyday shoppers at the checkout line felt the pinch. The result? Higher prices for countless products, squeezing family budgets and making it harder for small businesses to compete. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce estimated that retaliatory tariffs from other countries put 2.5 million American jobs at risk, especially in states that rely heavily on exports. These are places where manufacturing and agriculture are the backbone of local economies, and where even a small drop in demand can have outsized effects on employment and community stability. Ironically, the manufacturing sector, one of the intended beneficiaries of the tariffs, ended up losing over 75,000 jobs. Higher input costs made it more expensive to produce goods in the U.S., leading to project cancellations, layoffs, and even plant closures. For many workers, the promise of revitalized industry turned into the reality of lost paychecks and uncertain futures. On a global scale, the World Trade Organization reported the slowest trade growth in a decade. Supply chains, which had been carefully built over years, were suddenly thrown into chaos. Delays, bottlenecks, and increased costs became the new normal, affecting not just the U.S., but economies around the world. In response, companies scrambled to relocate production to other countries, incurring new risks and significant costs. Moving factories, retraining workers, and establishing new supplier relationships is a complex and expensive process, and not every business could adapt quickly or successfully. Developing nations, which had become integral links in global supply chains, faced their own set of challenges. Economic instability, currency fluctuations, and sudden surges or drops in demand created uncertainty for workers and businesses alike, threatening hard-won gains in growth and development. American farmers were hit especially hard. China, once the top buyer of U.S. soybeans, halted purchases in retaliation, causing U.S. exports to China to plunge from $24 billion to under $10 billion in just 2 years. This sudden loss of a key market left many farmers with unsold crops and mounting financial pressure. While the federal government stepped in with aid packages, these payments offered only temporary relief. Meanwhile, competitors like Brazil and Argentina quickly filled the gap, building new trade relationships and capturing market share that American farmers may never fully regain. The loss of market share has proven difficult to recover, leaving many U.S. farming communities in a precarious position. For some, the impact has meant shuttered businesses, declining property values, and a sense of uncertainty about the future of rural America. When we look at the numbers, a clear story emerges. Tariffs disrupted the economy, cost jobs, and reshaped global trade in ways that are still being felt today. The intended benefits were often outweighed by the unintended consequences, leaving many sectors worse off than before. The legacy of these tariffs stands as a cautionary tale, a reminder that even well-intentioned policies can have far-reaching and sometimes damaging effects, rippling through communities, industries, and the global economy in ways that are difficult to predict or reverse. Last week, the Supreme Court delivered a landmark decision in American Institute for International Steel versus United States, curbing executive power over trade. In a 6-3 ruling, the court found that using Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act to justify broad tariffs on national security grounds was unconstitutional. The majority opinion, by Chief Justice Roberts, clarified that national security cannot be stretched to cover general economic competition. The ruling narrows Section 232's scope, requiring a direct, credible threat to defense, not just economic rivalry. The court ordered an immediate halt to these tariffs, signaling a new era of judicial oversight on trade policy. The decision forces Congress to reclaim its constitutional role in setting trade rules. The Supreme Court stepped in to answer a core constitutional question that has shaped American governance for generations. When and to what extent should the judiciary intervene to maintain the balance of power between Congress and the president? This case was not just about a single law, but about the very structure of our government. At the heart of the matter was a fundamental issue. How much authority can Congress delegate to the president, especially when it comes to critical areas like trade policy? The Constitution gives Congress the power to regulate commerce, but over time, Congress has often given the president broad discretion to act in the nation's interest. Section 232 was originally designed as a safeguard for national emergencies, ensuring the U.S. would always have enough steel for defense and security needs. It was never intended as a tool for routine economic protectionism or to bypass Congress's role in setting tariffs. The court found that the executive's sweeping use of Section 232, especially in recent years, amounted to creating new tax law by executive order. This, the justices emphasized, is a power explicitly reserved for Congress under the Constitution's Taxing and Spending Clause. Chief Justice Roberts, writing for the majority, warned that if the president could unilaterally impose tariffs under the guise of national security, Congress's constitutional authority over trade would be rendered meaningless. The court stressed the importance of clear limits on executive power. However, the dissenting justices argued that the president should have broad discretion in matters of national security, including trade. They cautioned that the court's decision could tie the hands of future presidents in times of crisis. But the majority saw unchecked executive authority as a greater threat to the system of checks and balances. Ultimately, the decision reasserts Congress's central role in trade policy, demanding a more collaborative and transparent approach between the legislative and executive branches. It's a call for renewed oversight and cooperation. This ruling marks a pivotal moment for the separation of powers, reinforcing the foundational principle that no single branch should dominate the others, and ensuring that the delicate balance at the heart of American democracy endures. For American businesses, the Supreme Court's decision is a turning point. Manufacturers relying on imported steel and aluminum will see immediate cost relief, potentially lowering prices and reviving shelved projects. Domestic producers, who benefited from tariffs, now face renewed global competition and uncertainty. Many companies restructured supply chains to avoid tariffs, decisions not easily reversed, creating new dilemmas. The ruling restores predictability, ending years of policy whiplash and allowing businesses to plan with greater confidence. Stability is back, but the adjustment will be complex. For years, American consumers have quietly shouldered the burden of hidden tariff costs, often without even realizing it. Every trip to the grocery store, every visit to the car dealership, and every purchase of a new appliance has been subtly inflated by these extra fees. But now, at last, there's a real reason to breathe a sigh of relief. The recent removal of tariffs on steel and aluminum is expected to have a ripple effect across the economy. This change should help lower prices on a wide range of everyday items: cars, refrigerators, washing machines, and even the canned goods lining supermarket shelves. For many families, these are not luxury purchases, but essentials. According to leading economists, the average American household could save hundreds of dollars each year as these extra costs gradually disappear from the supply chain. That means more money left over for groceries, school supplies, or even a family night out, real tangible benefits for millions of people. The Supreme Court's ruling also opens the door to greater product variety. Companies that once cut back on offerings due to high import costs can now reintroduce or expand their product lines, giving shoppers more choices and better value. Of course, these price drops won't happen overnight. The savings must first work their way through the complex supply chain, from manufacturers to distributors to retailers. But the trend is unmistakable. Disinflation is on the horizon for goods that were previously hit hardest by tariffs. While it's true that some companies may choose to keep a portion of the savings for themselves, the overall effect is clear. Consumers stand to benefit the most from this decision. The Supreme Court's decision represents a rare and direct victory for household budgets across the country. It's a moment when policy changes translate into real positive impacts for everyday Americans. In essence, this marks the end of a costly, invisible tax that has quietly drained wallets for years. For American families, that's a change worth celebrating. The Supreme Court's decision has been met with relief and optimism by U.S. allies. The EU, Canada, and Japan see it as a chance to reset trade relations and remove retaliatory tariffs. North American partners expect smoother collaboration and fewer trade disputes under the USMCA. China's response is cautious. While welcoming the move, they note it doesn't affect broader tariffs tied to technology disputes. The ruling lowers tensions but doesn't end U.S.-China competition. For the World Trade Organization, it's a boost for rules-based trade and multilateralism. The decision signals renewed U.S. commitment to international frameworks. It could revive WTO reform and global cooperation. The world is watching for America's next move. This ruling shifts trade power from the White House back to Congress. Future administrations will need explicit congressional approval for broad tariffs, slowing the process and inviting public debate. Congress now faces pressure to fill the policy vacuum, with factions pushing for either free trade or targeted protection. The decision also changes the calculus on China, weakening unilateral leverage and encouraging multilateral strategies. We may see a renaissance of congressional authority and a modernization of trade laws. The era of sweeping, unilateral trade actions is ending. The next phase will be more deliberative and more accountable. America's trade future is now in lawmakers' hands. Several futures are possible after the court's decision. Congress could embrace global engagement, reforming the WTO and negotiating new deals, restoring stability and competitiveness. Or legislative gridlock could leave U.S. trade policy in limbo, undermining business confidence and global partnerships. A third path, Congress crafts targeted protections for key industries, using precise tools instead of broad tariffs. The administration's response, collaborative or confrontational, will shape the outcome. The debate over America's global economic role is far from over. The venue has shifted from the executive to the legislature. The coming months will define the next generation of U.S. trade. The Supreme Court's decision is a turning point for U.S. and global trade. By reining in executive power, the court has provided relief to businesses and consumers while forcing a national debate on America's economic future. The tariffs' legacy disrupted supply chains, higher prices, and global retaliation with few lasting benefits. Now, Congress must craft a modern strategic trade policy or risk leaving the nation adrift. Allies are hopeful, but challenges with China and supply chain security remain. The era of broad, unilateral tariffs is over. The question now, what will replace it?